Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And it's raining today, which I like, so I figured I'd get on with one of these Ramble On episodes. So there's been a lot going on, but I haven't had time to talk about all of it. I haven't even got to the wedding yet, have I? Goodness gracious. Well, this is, the 96th episode, I believe, of the podcast as a whole. I'm using all these Ramble On. I'm classifying them as bonus episodes instead of full episodes, but I've been doing this podcast for almost a year, and we're almost at 100 episodes total with the main episodes and these bonus episodes. I'm pretty excited about that. I was really curious if I could maintain this schedule for a year, and as long as I do one more Ramble On the week after this, I will have done it. And I was going to stop doing it twice a week, or going to stop releasing 2 episodes every week for the podcast, but I don't know, there's more engagement with the podcast, and I kind of like having twice a week instead of once a week. And there's other things I can do besides creating an entirely new podcast every week, which I haven't decided if I'm going to stop doing, but that does seem like eventually 2 original episodes every week is going to be really difficult to maintain. So I'm definitely getting to 100 episodes with 100 original podcasts, 2 per week. Following that, I'm going to introduce some new things into the Ramble On episodes. So there will be Re-Ramble, where I'll release old episodes that are still perfectly relevant. I'm still having these talks with people who listen to the podcast. They'll still ask me, so can I? And so where should I start? I'm still getting those questions. And can I travel and where should I start traveling? Those are really important conversations to have. That's where everything starts. If you can take that first step and start traveling, you're probably going to be fine. You're going to be set. Once you are traveling, it's very easy to see how beneficial traveling is to most people. So I'm going to take some older episodes like those and re-release those, and that way I'll be able to have content twice a week in some places if I don't have time or I haven't scheduled a new episode of this Ramble On or whatever. And those will be called Re-Ramble. And then I am going to start doing interviews, although I have not decided if those should be full episodes or honestly, if I'm going to just start making everything a full episode so I don't have to keep 2 distinct numbering systems, which is a lot. I mean, a lot relative to the amount of responsibility I usually have. Maybe I've already changed this, and the numbers are already collated into a single numbering system. That does seem easier if I just have one system rather than separating them like this. It was a good idea in the beginning, but I feel like if I just call them Ramble On episodes or Re-Ramble, and all of those are always on Saturdays. I don't know, folks. Thinking through it now. Write me something if you think that's a good idea. Is it kind of confusing that I have 2 separate full podcasts, basically? One informative, main one? Or do they seem the same to you anyway? Because I'm rambling on both of them. Anyway, the main thing I wanted to say is that after 100 episodes, I will be adding more content to the Saturday episodes in different forms. So I'll re-release some older episodes, and maybe it'll be information on housing or flights I found recently. Just other stuff that won't be requiring me to do a full current events episode in person every week. I might do several episodes and schedule those ahead of time, because you know what I've realized recently? I really want to start backpacking again. And I simply cannot do that when I'm bound to the strictures of the schedule that I've given myself. And I gave myself 100 episodes, and if you can do that, then you can start tweaking whatever you want to tweak. And I think after 100 episodes, I'm going to start banking more of these Saturday current events episodes so that I'll have a couple weeks or a month to go out walking into the woods, as is my wont. But we're only on 98. I shouldn't be saying all this. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. Boom. Knocked on wood. Just to be safe. We'll reach 100 soon. So there might be a change up in the format and content of the Saturday episodes. And the Wednesdays will continue to just be new, informative travel stuff every week. Okay. Running to catch the bus. I had to run to catch the bus to the other terminal in the Manila airport, even though I thought I would probably make it on time. I didn't have a ton of time, and the bus wasn't like pulling away right when I ran up. But I applied this to everything. I do feel like running or putting in the effort to do something usually works out for me, and it's good for my mindset. Like, if I had just strolled up to the bus and got in, that's okay. That's okay if it works, that's fine. But if I make a little bit of effort to get to the bus that I have to get to the next terminal, I feel a little better that I am working to achieve something. Maybe that's retirement, and I just don't have to do anything. Like, I don't have any, not goals, but I don't have any objectives that I must meet. So maybe giving these little objectives or proving to myself that I'm still showing effort to participate in life makes me feel better. And trying to run to the bus and getting it does sort of validate that decision more than if I strolled casually up to the bus. What I will change is I will not be waiting in line at the airports anymore. I started waiting in line, and I never used to. I would just wait until the end of the line showed up and then be the last person in line. But recently, I've had to, several times in a row, I've had to, because of connections, I've had to run there, and then I waited in line with everybody else waiting in the ticket line. And that's never made sense to me because the line's still there. If you're at the end, you're still in the line, you're going to get on the plane. But just because I don't know, I think it's just because I ran into so many issues with layovers being close connected that I started waiting in line. And Jetstar, is that on my list here of Ramble On things to talk about, has killed that desire in me. No, Jetstar's way later. Jetstar is slow. That's a preview. I gotta go in order of this list or I'll get all messed up. So, grammatical gender. I wrote that down because it's amazing that there are so many languages that don't have grammatical gender, and then a bunch of other languages just chose to introduce grammatical gender to words, where they were just like, tennis, you're a girl, and computers, you're a boy, boats, you're a girl. Like, there's so many so many languages that were like, comforters, that's a boy, but paper clips are girls, that have just decided that inanimate objects are boys or girls. Because I was just speaking Spanish for a year, and now I'm back, Indonesian, and then, Japanese now. And I'm just like, oh yeah, how simple is this when you don't have to think about whether your laundry bag is a boy or a girl? Like, no genders in language makes so much sense. So does the no articles, no the or anything, no definite articles. That's pretty nice. It's interesting studying Japanese again. Anyway, wait. Order. Brownie brittle. I was on the flight to Bacolod, and there was a guy sitting with a lady. There was a couple, and he offered me his brownie brittle because I guess, or the girl said she didn't want her brownie brittle, so she asked him to give it to me. And I was like floored. I was like, oh, this is so kind. Are you sure? And he's like, yeah, take it. And so I ate it, and it was great. It's just like thin, crunchy brownie. It was really good. And he told me that she wanted to share her Coca-Cola with me too. And I was like, oh, thank you, but I can't. I think this bag of brownies is already too much sugar for me. More Coke, and I'm just going to go into diabetic shock. And he was like, haha, yes. And he was like, my mom doesn't drink a lot of sugar either. And I was like, what? that's your mom? I didn't say that because that would be inappropriate and weird. But in my head, I was like, oh yeah, Sugar's rough. And I was like, she looks like she's younger than you. And that was his, and Filipino mom. He was huge. This dude was like easily over 2 meters tall. And she was 1.5 meters, maybe. She weighed 25% of her son, who was a very large person. And it was really funny when he casually mentioned that was his mom, because she looked younger than him and she was a tiny, tiny specimen of a human being compared to what this young man had strapped into as a giant human being. Strapped out as. Yeah, that's good. He strapped out into a giant. Anyway, that was very nice of them to give me some brownie brittle and offer me some soda. Maybe I looked super skinny because I was on the flight to the Philippines right after Indonesia, so I was running every day. And I was much thinner than I became after I went to the wedding and the Philippines. So while I was on the airplane, I was trying to stay awake, I guess, or I just wasn't really tired yet. And then I started looking at a list because I have offline Wikipedia using KiwiX on my phone, and it just has a list of all Filipino foods. And so I thought I was going to like go through the list until I got tired, but I love food, so that obviously didn't happen. I instead created this huge list of every Filipino dish in the Wikipedia Filipino cuisine list that I wanted to try. And that turned out like 40, 50 dishes out of, 100. I don't want anything sweet. There was a lot of sweet dishes, but there was a bunch of stuff I have never heard of before. There was one where they beat a chicken to death so that the blood suffuses its tissues so that the flesh has a different taste because of the hematomas, right? Yikes. Anyway, I would try that. I ended up writing this huge list of all the different Filipino dishes I wanted to try. And it was cool. I was like pretty proud of it. I was like, yeah, look at that. That's all the stuff. And I showed it to the people I was sitting next to because we talked a little bit and they asked what I was doing. And they were like, wow, that's a long list. I was like, yeah, I got a little obsessive over going through all of Filipino cuisine. And then when I got off, I talked to my friends too. And Annie said she had heard of maybe 10% of the list. Most of it, she knew what tocino was, of course, and she knew what like sisig was, which is very popular. But she didn't know most of the traditional Filipino dishes according to Wikipedia. And I went to a bunch of local restaurants around Bacolod, and they all had sisig and a couple had tocino. But other than that, there were not many traditional Filipino. I think I would have to look for a specifically traditional Filipino restaurant. And it was such a whirlwind couple of weeks with the wedding and hanging out with friends I hadn't seen in 2 years and trying grilled balut. Oh my gosh, I got to talk about that. That I didn't end up going to any traditional houses. I just went to all the restaurants my friends and their kid and their parents-in-laws wanted to go to, and that was funny enough, and it's still great food. There was like grilled ribs and grilled chicken and tasty food everywhere, but it wasn't exactly a lot of okay, so what's the barbecue in the Philippines called? Inasal. Yeah, Inasal is about as traditional Filipino food now as it gets, but it just wasn't any of the like old traditional foods that would be made back in the day that were in this big list I saw. It seems like modern food, there's a lot more fast food in the Filipino cuisine these days than there may have been before. A lot of the older ones look like they take a really long time to cook. There was one where they make a cone. It's the national dish, I think, a cone of rice, and it's surrounded by a whole bunch of little Filipino dishes. I really wanted to try that, but I didn't see it until only a few days before I left. And then I had to go to that buffet, if I mentioned that yet, and there was just too much going on. So I didn't get to try as many Filipino traditional dishes as I like, but I did make an effort to walk around to the local restaurants where I was, and I did manage to get a few sisig and a few soups and a few like local dishes that I'm not going to find in any other country. I don't think I'm going to see sisig anywhere else. There must be equivalents in other countries, of course, but this was, yeah, it was cool. I got to try a few of the dishes on my way too long food list. Oh, also, a couple other things. On that flight over to Bacolod, there was a girl who was not a good flyer, and that's not fair. She's 35,000 feet in the air. We shouldn't say that. She was scared of being 35,000 feet in the air in a metal tube that is somehow in the air. It's crazy. It makes total sense to be scared. And she was scared, but we were both sitting at the end of the plane. I was the second to the last row, and her friend, I believe they were both Irish, were at the very back of the plane. And if you don't know, the front of the plane and the back of the plane are very different in terms of turbulence. If you're near the front of the plane, you're not going to feel much. If you're in the back of the plane, you're going to feel a lot. You can imagine if you've ever been like in the back seat versus the front seat, or the driver's seat versus the back seat of a vehicle. If you turn the car, the guys in the back feel the turn a lot more. That's what turbulence. So if you're in the back, there's going to be a lot more turbulence than you'll feel up in the front of the plane. And this girl was really worrying about it. And I was like, I should tell her it's not this bad all the time. And like, we are at the back of the plane. And then her friend brought up, like, a stewardess was saying to her that it's because we're in the back of the plane. And I was like, perfect, because I didn't want to intrude in their conversation, but then she brought it up, and so I leaned around and was just like, that stewardess is completely correct. If you are at the front of the plane, you're going to feel way less turbulence. And I told them the little car example, and I wanted to share that too, just in case. If any of you are listening to this and are going to go traveling and you're really worried about plane turbulence, it might be worth it for you to pay the $20 or whatever to get a seat near the front of the plane, because it's night and day in terms of turbulence. I'm very used to it, but obviously if you're traveling for the first time, this was the Irish girl's second flight, I think, the one who was worried about flying, and the first one had already had turbulence, and this one was apparently worse. And both times they were at the back of the plane. So yeah, after I corroborated what her friend had heard, she was like, yeah, I think I'll definitely be getting tickets near the front of the plane. So if you're worried about turbulence, get tickets near the front of the plane or mid-plane, and you'll see, like, okay, this is what turbulence is, but it won't feel as crazy as it does near the back of the plane, where the further you are to the back of the plane, the more you'll feel like any bumps or turbulence at all. It's still usually not crazy. I'm almost always at the back of the plane. Well, that's not true, but I'm at the back of the plane often because I fly often, and I never select my seat. I always just get random seats assigned. And even when I'm all the way in the back, yeah, I'll bump or shake, but I don't know. I'm just used to it, I guess. I'm just used to it at this point. It doesn't bother me too much. In the beginning of traveling, it makes perfect sense to want to avoid turbulence until you're used to it, because you'll still feel it a little in the front and middle of the plane, just not as much as all the way in the back. Also, I have to mention this. I was sitting directly behind skinny Dwayne Johnson. It wasn't actually The Rock, but this dude he looked like The Rock. Like before Captain America goes into that machine that makes him buff, it looks like Dwayne Johnson before he became buff was sitting right in front of me. Bald, same facial features. And I was almost like, oh, is he taking a time off to whatever? But I was like, no, he can't get that skinny. But I was sitting right behind a skinny version of The Rock. And I was really happy about that. I got an emergency row seat, which kind of nice because I can stretch out, but I don't need that extra room. And then I don't have a place like to take off my shoes under the seat in front of me, which depending on the flight I am on, I will totally do. If everyone else is kicking their shoes off like they were going to the Philippines, I will absolutely kick my shoes off and just have my socks on. But if everyone is keeping their shoes on, I usually keep my shoes on. So I was going to take off my shoes, but then the stewardess asked me to seat myself in the exit row because I was traveling by myself. And I guess there's not many solo travelers relative to people traveling in a group, and they want solo people. Maybe we're more rational in the event of an emergency. We won't be trying to take care of everyone we brought with us. We'll be focusing on the emergency procedures that I do occasionally go over. I read the little pamphlet they give you every now and then. So it was nice because when you get the emergency row and you have the extra leg room because it's the emergency row, people do stare at you jealous. And that's kind of fun because you're like, hey, there's nothing I could do. They wanted me here. But everyone who is cramped into a seat just looks at you like, oh, must be nice. And that is kind of funny when that happens. But for the most part, I kind of like the regular seats better than the emergency seat. I don't know if it matters to me at all, to be perfectly honest. I think it's really just if I take my shoes off, no one will really notice if I kick them under the seat in front of me versus if there's no seat in front of me to put my shoes under. Belgian friend. Okay, there was Belgian. There was a Belgian in... Where was he? It doesn't matter. We're almost off the plane. So this was in the last airport I was in, which was probably Manila. But he noticed me when I plugged in. I guess there weren't a lot of non-Filipinos in the airport. And he asked me how I was doing and what I was doing. And I explained. Because some people are just like, hey, what's up? And you're just like, just flying to Bacolod, okay. But then some people are really curious, how are you traveling? And so they ask multiple questions in a row, and that's what this guy was doing. He asked what I was up to, and he was like, oh, cool, why are you going? For a wedding? And you have time off work? And I was like, no, I actually am retired. And he was like, really? How'd you do that? And he had a lot of follow-up questions. So I started telling an abridged version of it, which is basically teach English, invest your money, retire. And he started talking about how he wanted to do something else because he'd been living in the Philippines now for several years, and he was working as a security guard sometimes, and he wasn't making a ton of money because it was like a local job in the Philippines where the salary is not very high. But he didn't have a work visa, so that's the only thing he could get. And I went into my spiel. I was just like, hey, man, if you take this... And he was Belgian, so his accented English, like, it was accented strong. But there are so many jobs, even, like, in China, outside of China, Thailand, Southeast Asia. I was like, there are so many countries where if you get this certification, the TEFL certification, even with your accented English, if you improve it, great. If not, you'll still be able to find a job that will pay you more than what he said he was making. He was only making like 16,000 pesos a month at this job, and that's less than 300 USD a month. So he could easily, even going... Actually, he could probably do this in the Philippines. The guy, I don't know, man. I want to help people, and I do. I still talk to them. It's just everyone, so many people are stuck in this rut. I don't know if maybe the Philippines doesn't pay English teachers as much, but even if he went to Thailand, where the pay is relatively low, even Cambodia, where the pay is relatively low, he would still be making triple. He'd certainly be making close to US $1,000 a month. And he could get oh, he's not a native English speaker. That's right. That's what it was. He said he looked into English speaking, but since he wasn't a native speaker, he couldn't find a job. And I was like, get the TEFL certificate. You will get a job. Because he also had a 4-year college degree, and that's the only other thing people ever ask. Like, the TEFL is more important generally for finding a job, but the only other thing they'll ask is if you have a 2 or 4-year degree. And he either had a 2 or 4-year, I can't remember, but I was like, okay, then you're all set. There are 1.5 billion English language learners. You can teach online. And I gave him a list of the online ones from a Lemmy post I made. Like, these ones you don't even need the TEFL certificate for this. And if you're only making 16,000 Filipino pesos, you'll make more on these platforms, even if you're teaching at $5 per hour. You'll only have to work 15 hours a week to pass the salary you're making now, and you won't have to leave the room. So I gave this Belgian guy a bunch of information about which TEFL academy he should go to and take part in, or where he could find the accredited ones online. And I reassured him, I was like, the wedding I'm going to right now is a Chinese person who speaks great English and a Filipino girl who speaks great English. They're both English teachers, and their accent is about as strong as yours, so you'll be fine. And he got really excited, but once he realized he could do it, like once he believed me, that's when people start being like, but I can't actually because... So he was like, but I bet I can't like take my Filipino girlfriend with me, right? It's really difficult to like travel to China if I want to teach English there. And I was like, no, the one I'm talking about is Filipino. She lives there. It's not very difficult at all. It's the most difficult visa process in the free world, I will say, like China. But that just means it takes 2 hours to fill out the visa application form instead of 40 minutes. If you like fill out the form, you'll still be able to travel there, especially right now. China's opening up their immigration a lot recently. I think Filipinos actually have 10 days free travel now. Oh no, they weren't included in the update. But there are plenty of Filipinos living there teaching English, like a lot. I worked with many of them. And I told him, yeah, she can get a visa over there too. But the reason I'm classifying that as a like pushback sort of question instead of a genuine question is because he was just complaining about his Filipino girlfriend 3 sentences earlier in our discussion. He was saying that he wants to like move on because, well, whatever relationship reasons anyone has. But then 3 sentences later, he's like, but can I take my girlfriend with me? And it's like, man, you have the whole life in front of you. You're just telling me about how much you're not really into this girl. There's another 3 billion people who you might be interested in other countries. But again, it makes perfect sense. I wanted to know way more before I went to China and started teaching English. I was kind of at the end of my rope living in the US. I hated the retail, corporate, customer service culture I was a part of there. It felt like a terrible way to begin a career, and it felt completely dead end. And this guy working for $300 USD a month in the Philippines felt trapped in his own way. But he was working for $300 USD a month. Even if he's working at the cheapest online thing that pays $5 per hour, he works 20 hours a week, and hang on, let me check. $275 US dollars. So he's making $275. So if he works like 22 hours per week, roughly, teaching English online, if he's only getting $5 per hour, which is the lowest I have ever heard anyone get paid to teach English, even non-native speakers, he's still beating his salary now working half as much. And it's going to be way less trouble to just sit in your chair at home and repeat primary colors and basic sentences. Okay, so that guy was really excited to meet me, and we talked, and I gave him all the basic information I could. How to get the TEFL certificate. I showed him on my phone, and I said, these are websites, these are real jobs right now. I showed him like their pay, which is crazy high, and just more than the pay, I just want to show him these are jobs that are available right now, and there are a ton of them. There's not as many since Xi Jinping stopped K9 English in K through 9. English used to be mandatory in Chinese elementary schools. It's not mandatory anymore, so there's not as many opportunities, but there are still thousands of jobs available for people with the TEFL certificate who are English speakers. And he seemed pretty excited about it, so I hope it worked out for that guy. You can get that TEFL certificate in a couple weeks, so if he was working on it at all, he could already have the TEFL certificate. He could already have a job paying him, if he has the TEFL certificate, much more likely close to $10 an hour, in which case he only has to work 10 hours a week, or a couple hours, 1.5 hours a day, to beat his current salary. It's just, man, poor people feel trapped. And I feel bad, and it's my favorite thing to talk about, so it was good. I hope things work out for that guy, and I hope he doesn't feel as trapped as he did before. So best of luck, my Belgian friend. Okay, that's the last airport stuff. We're in the Philippines, folks. You know what? Well, let's just start the Philippines on the next one. We're already half an hour in, and it's all going to be Filipino stuff coming in. I haven't been to the Philippines in a decade, so this will be an interesting introduction. This will be an interesting episode because it won't sound... I had a lot of ideas about the Philippines. Let's talk about them in the next episode. You can talk to me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or bitofarambler on Lemmy or Blue Sky. I'm always here because I'm just hanging out. I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.